Maplegrove was the kind of town that looked like it had fallen out of a Hallmark movie. Cobblestone streets, white picket fences, dogs that knew how to wave, and neighbors who somehow always knew when you'd had a bad day before you even said a word. It was quiet, a little too curious, and aggressively wholesome. Which is why Emma Rosehart thought it would be the perfect place to hide from the world. After leaving her chaotic life in the city and a marketing job that almost gave her a nervous breakdown, Emma came to Maplegrove to take over her late aunt's cozy old bookstore. She wanted peace, solitude, maybe a plant or two, and long walks with zero human interaction. Emma wasn't always this closed off. Once upon a time, she believed in grand gestures and clean slates. She fell in love young, with a man named Daniel who had a smile that promised forever, but a heart that couldn't commit past Tuesday. They'd planned a future together, an apartment downtown, a dog named Fitzgerald, and dual promotions that would make their parents proud. But 3 weeks before their wedding, Daniel called it off over voicemail. He said something about needing space and finding himself in Thailand. He left her with a dress, a broken lease, and 3 months of therapy bills. Since then, Emma's heart had gone into lockdown. She covered the cracks with sarcasm, poured herself into books, and built walls so high not even a poet could reach her. What she did not want, what she certainly did not need, was Theo Granger. The first time they met, he walked into her bookstore like he owned the oxygen in the room, rain dripping from his jacket onto her favorite vintage rug. He looked around and muttered, "Nice place. Smells like old ghosts and desperation." Emma, who'd been alphabetizing the classics by author, didn't even look up. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were lost. The town dump is that way." From that moment, it was on. He was the local carpenter, gruff, sarcastic, permanently in plaid. He smelled like cedar and trouble, with a jawline that looked carved from granite and a scowl that never took a day off. But underneath the lumberjack aesthetic was a man stitched together from heartbreak and humility. Years ago, Theo had been engaged to someone named Claire, a woman who loved the idea of him more than the man himself. They made it as far as the altar. Literally. He waited at the front of the church for a bride who never showed. Turns out, she had fallen for someone else, his best friend. After that, Theo quit his architecture job in the city and moved back to Maplegrove to build things that didn't walk away. Wood, at least, didn't lie to your face. He traded wedding rings for woodworking and stitched his bruised heart shut with dry humor and emotional duct tape. People called him grumpy, but that wasn't fair. He just didn't believe in wasting words anymore. She was the city transplant with a taste for vintage novels, black coffee, and solitude. They were opposites in every way, and somehow, fate decided they'd bump into each other constantly. He parked his truck crooked in front of her store every Thursday. She, accidentally, turned up her classical music during his construction gigs across the street. He mocked her taste in books. She questioned his ability to form a coherent sentence without sounding like a grumpy lumberjack. They bickered like a sport. Sarcasm was their shared language. He called her Miss Snooty Novels. She called him Mr. Grumpy Pants. They disagreed about everything. The best coffee shop, he swore by Dave's Diner. She was loyal to the artsy beehive, the town's annual decorations, and even the correct pronunciation of pecan. Everyone in Maplegrove assumed they hated each other. They weren't entirely wrong, except they weren't entirely right either. Things started to shift during the Maplegrove Summer Fair. Emma hadn't planned to enter the pie contest, but Mrs. Langley practically shoved her into it, saying, "You need to socialize, dear. And your apple cinnamon pie tastes like sin." Theo, of course, entered too, because why wouldn't he? His pie? Bourbon peach with a chili kick. As if he needed to make everything dramatic. They baked side by side under a white tent, exchanging barbed jabs while elbowing each other over oven space. "Don't overbake your crust, Miss Novels. Don't burn the town down with your spicy mess, Mr. Overcompensation." The tension sizzled harder than their pies. When the judges announced a tie, something that hadn't happened in 20 years, they were both so stunned they forgot to argue for a full 10 seconds. They were forced to hold a shared trophy, a ceramic pie dish painted with daisies. It was awkward. Silly. and surprisingly warm. As they cleaned up their station, flowers still dusting their noses and laughter bubbling from the crowd, he leaned in too close and muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "You drive me insane, and I think I like it." Emma blinked. "You what?" He straightened. "Nothing. Flower in my throat. Must have been the cinnamon." But it wasn't the cinnamon. It was a crack in the armor neither of them admitted wearing. A few weeks later, during a relentless thunderstorm, Emma's bookstore roof finally gave out. Rain poured through the ceiling like a waterfall. She was standing ankle-deep in ruined paperbacks, desperately trying to save first editions, when Theo barged in, rain-soaked, toolbox in hand, and a familiar scowl plastered on his face. Well, he said. "Miss Novels in Distress." "I didn't ask for help," she snapped, hugging a stack of soaked poetry books to her chest. "And yet here I am, like some grumpy guardian angel." Despite herself, she let him in. They spent hours battling leaks, patching holes, and slipping on wet tiles. He broke her favorite lamp. She called him a walking disaster with a hammer fetish. But somewhere in the chaos, as he reached up to fix a ceiling beam and she held the ladder steady, their hands touched. It wasn't electric. It was steady, familiar. "Right." She looked up. "Why do we fight so much?" He glanced down. His voice dropped. "Because I don't know what to do with how much I want to kiss you." Silence. Rain tapping gently on the roof. And then they kissed. It wasn't movie perfect. No fireworks. No orchestra. Just two people, exhausted, soaked to the bone, finally admitting what they'd both been running from. Falling in love with Theo wasn't neat. He had emotional walls taller than his workshop ceiling. She had abandonment issues and a fear of needing anyone ever again. They stumbled, fought, made up, fought again, and through it all, they grew. She found out he once left a woman at the altar, not because he didn't love her, but because she was in love with someone else and didn't know how to say it. He found out Emma still wrote poetry in secret, dreaming of publishing, even after years of rejection. He built her a custom bookshelf in the back of the store, the one place her poetry now lived, hidden between Jane Austen and Walt Whitman. She taught him how to read metaphors without making a face. Slowly, they softened each other's sharp edges. The town noticed. Mrs. Langley beamed every time they walked into the market holding hands. The mayor started calling them the couple that survived war. Teenagers rolled their eyes at how often Emma and Theo snuck kisses at town meetings. Their sarcasm never stopped. "You still make the worst coffee," he'd say each morning. "And you still leave socks everywhere, like some wool-dropping woodland creature." But their words held affection now. The insults were laced with tenderness. One evening, after a lazy Sunday of rearranging books and painting the shop door teal, Theo knelt down, not in a grand gesture, not in front of a crowd, just quietly, in the bookstore aisle between poetry and romance. He held up a ring made of twisted silver and whispered, "Marry me." Not because we're perfect, but because we're perfectly us. Emma stared at him, heart hammering. "You still look like you sleep in lumberjack flannel," she said softly. "And you still hide your feelings behind sass and sarcasm." "Exactly," he grinned. "We're a disaster. Let's be a disaster together." She laughed through the tears and said yes. They got married under a willow tree, surrounded by too many pies and too much laughter. Her vows included the words, "I promise to never mock your chili peach pie again." His vows included, "I'll always read your poetry, even the weird ones." And in a town where love bloomed in quiet corners, Emma and Theo became the kind of couple that made others envious, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. They didn't fall in love the way most people dreamed. They argued, they challenged, they fought for each other. And somewhere in between sarcastic jabs, roof repairs, and flower fights, they found a love neither of them ever meant to find. But it was the best kind, the kind that stayed. Subscribe, like, share, and comment for more thrilling and amazing stories.